Hey, what's up and welcome back to Interpreting the Stars. For today, I'm going to be talking about a brand new film coming out of Gravitas Ventures on November 12th, and this one's going to be called The Accursed. The Accursed is essentially about a family of witches that have been avoiding a death curse for generations. When one witch curses another witch's entire bloodline, a protection spell is essentially put out there to stop the death curse, but it was really only ever a limited protection spell, and as they say, history will eventually come back to bite you in the behind, and in this case, the spirit of a very, very angry witch. I know that we're just coming off of Halloween and everything, but who doesn't love a good old classic witchy tale at any given time of the year? There's often times when I think about films centered around witches and witchcraft, and I think that they have yet to really scratch the surface of what's possible and what's not. There's a whole world out there of witches that remain to be seen. But is The Accursed an example of something fresh and original, or is it just a stale box of the same old crackers that somebody left out a year back? The best way that I can describe this film is that it's a bit of a mixture. Because on one side of the argument, we have curses, we have spells, we have Latin-speaking ladies, and heck, even a cauldron shows up at one point. But on the other side of the same argument, this mostly takes place in modern day. So you got witches borrowing incredibly classic ancient rituals in today's day and age, and even though that alone isn't all that original, I always like to see that, and the different ways that films approach this concept. How it's approached here is intriguing, albeit a bit confusing and maybe a little bit convoluted at times. This movie delves really deep into the lore of the family's history and witchcraft. One of its strongest attributes is just the fact that they don't ever really call themselves witches. You know that they are because you know how witches operate, but to them, it's just a gift given to them by their heritage and lineage. To them, they're just gifted ladies that can do a lot of different things that most people wouldn't understand. It's an interesting take on the witch aspect, and I found that to be admirable and even relatable to a degree, but that lore is so complicated. It starts off on a death curse, and like a good snowball effect, the film works tirelessly to come up with different ways to protect these people from the death curse, that all this lore and verbiage gets thrown at you left and right. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I started to drown a little bit in its explanations. So I'd say that there's certainly aspects about this movie that I got kind of confused with. I did, however, like the look of the monster, or the creature, so to speak, that's targeting all these different people. Very creepy looking thing. Often seen crawling around in the background, hiding behind things, creeping about, sometimes jumping out at people. It's a little bit tacky and it's a little bit cliche, but I did enjoy watching it for that creature. Honestly, I would say a majority of this film often follows tropes and stereotypes of both witch lore as well as typical horror film stuff. So one of the biggest negatives that I have to say about it is just the mere fact that it's probably nothing you remember forever. It's kind of forgettable. It just doesn't offer the viewer enough new things in order to be considered unique in any real sense. Basically, if you're a fan of horror, and specifically a fan of witches in horror, you might find this movie to be fun enough as a popcorn flick, but nothing more. At worst, you might start complaining about a confusing mix of accents that don't always make a lot of sense, maybe some bad acting from some of the actors at certain points, and there's also some visuals that, if you want to nitpick, were noticeable at times. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at my final score for a second. From a tactical, unbiased perspective, this film is mostly fair. I did like the modern take on witches kind of existing in their own community while still using classic witch curses and stuff. I also liked the design of the creature that was attacking everybody. But a huge majority of the film is nothing new, very business as usual in terms of horror cliches, meaning that you might end up considering this one forgettable at the end of the day. So this unbiased score is 66%. As for how I personally felt about it as a whole, or my bias score, this is a little bit lower than that because it's an imperfect film that, due to all the cliches and lack of originality, I think it's kind of forgettable, like I said before. So this score is 56%, meaning that at the end of the day, when both scores are combined, we end up with a final rating of 61%. 61 out of 100 possible stars, or a rather average letter grade of C. But what about you folks? Have you seen The Accursed? And if so, let me know your thoughts about it in the comment section down below and how you rank it as a witch film. And as for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit that like, subscribe button, and bell to be notified when I come out with my next review. And until then, peace out.
Dave examines movies we just watch for fun. Davey is the expert. He is the number